Democrats' turn, and Charlie Gibson is in Manchester, New Hampshire. Charlie.
Thank you very much, Diane, and thank you, George. We are back at the Dana Humanities Center at St. Anselm College here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I am delighted to say that the four leading Democratic presidential candidates vying for the Democratic nomination are all joining us this evening. And we have again drawn lots for their placement on the stage. And so let me introduce them from left to right. We have with us former Senator John Edwards of North Carolina, Senator Barack Obama of Illinois, Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico, and Senator Hillary Clinton from New York. And again, for the first 45 minutes of this debate, I will be posing questions in three rather broad categories. We'll do 15 minutes each, but with the hope that I can sort of stay out of the way to the extent possible and let the candidates discuss the issues among themselves. There are no lights to limit time limits, at least for this part of the debate, and but I will interrupt politely, I hope, if things seem to be going a little bit long. So let me start with what is generally agreed to be, I think, the greatest threat to the United States today, and somewhat to my surprise has not been discussed as much in the presidential debates this year as I thought would be, and that is nuclear terrorism. And for some background, here's ABC's chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross.
After more than 6 years of trying, the United States still does not have a reliable way to spot nuclear material that terrorists might smuggle into the country, much as ABC News twice did in demonstrations without being caught. And after 6 years of trying, the United States has yet to capture the man who says it is his religious duty to get nuclear weapons, Osama bin Laden. And in the last 18 months, U.S. officials say his al-Qaeda has regrouped, using safe havens along the Pakistani border to train and dispatch hundreds of new recruits. And just as troubling, amidst all the turmoil in Pakistan, the influence of bin Laden continues to grow there, a country with many nuclear weapons. Charlie?
Brian Ross there. Well, Osama bin Laden, as he pointed out, has said it is his duty to try to get nuclear weapons. Al-Qaeda has been reconstituted and re-energized in the western part of Pakistan. And so my general question is, how aggressively would you go after al-Qaeda leadership there? And let me start with you, Senator Obama, because it was you who said in your foreign policy speech that you would go into western Pakistan, if you had actionable intelligence, to go after him, whether or not the Pakistani government agreed. You stand by that?
I absolutely do stand by it, Charlie. What I said was that we should do everything in our power to push and cooperate with the Pakistani government in taking on al-Qaeda, which is now based in northwest Pakistan. And what we know from our national intelligence estimates is that al-Qaeda is stronger now than at any time since 2001. And so back in August, I said we should work with the Pakistani government, first of all, to encourage democracy in Pakistan, so you've got a legitimate government that we're working with. And secondly, that we have to press them to do more to take on al-Qaeda in their territory. What I said was if they could not or would not do so, and we had actionable intelligence, then I would strike. And I should add that Lee Hamilton and Tom Keene, the heads of the 9/11 Commission, a few months later, wrote an editorial saying the exact same thing. I think it's indisputable that that should be our course. Let me just add one thing, though, on the broader issue of nuclear proliferation. This is something that I've worked on since I've been in the Senate. I worked with Richard Lugar, then the Republican head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to pass the next stage of what was Nunn-Lugar, so that we would have improved interdiction of potentially nuclear materials. And it is important for us to rebuild a nuclear non-proliferation strategy, something that this administration, frankly, has ignored and has made us less safe as a consequence. It would not cost us that much, for example, and would take about 4 years for us to lock down the loose nuclear weapons that are still floating out there, and we have not done the job.
I'm going to go to the others in a moment, but what you just outlined is essentially the Bush doctrine. We can attack if we want to, no matter the sovereignty of the Pakistan.
No, that is not the same thing, because here we have a situation where al-Qaeda, a sworn enemy of the United States that killed 3,000 Americans and is currently plotting to do the same, is in the territory of Pakistan. We know that. And you know, this is not speculation. This is not a situation where we anticipate a possible threat in the future. And my job as Commander-in-Chief will be to make sure that we strike anybody who would do America harm when we have actionable intelligence to do so.
Senators, do you agree with him?
If I, as President of the United States, know where Osama bin Laden is, I would go get him, period. This man is the mastermind of a mass murder in the United States of America. He is public enemy number one, as Al-Qaeda is. But I would add, this has to be put in the bigger context of what should America be doing over the long term to deal with this whole issue of nuclear proliferation. Because if you look at Pakistan, it's a perfect vehicle for actually thinking about this issue. Here's an unstable leader, Musharraf, in a country with a serious, radical, violently radical element that could, under some circumstances, take over the government. If they did, they would have control of a nuclear weapon. They could either use it or they could turn it over to a terrorist organization to be used against America or some of our allies. I think the bigger picture on this is, what do we do over the long term? Because what we're doing now is essentially an ad hoc, nation-by-nation, case-by-case basis of trying to control the spread of this nuclear technology. In the short term, that is exactly what we should do and what I would do as President of the United States. But A.Q. Khan, who developed the nuclear weapon for Pakistan, we know has already spread some of this technology to other places. And I think this ad hoc policy does not work over the long term. And what I believe we should be doing over the long term, and what I will do as President of the United States, besides dealing with these short-term threats, which are very serious and should be taken seriously, I, as President of the United States, want to do what some Republicans and some Democrats have said, which is to lead a long-term initiative, international initiative, to actually rid the world of nuclear weapons, because that is the only way to make the world safer and secure and to keep America safe.
Well, you led me right up to the point of what you'd do if the Islamic radicals actually took control of the Pakistani government and therefore were in control of nuclear weapons, and then you went away from that. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Governor Richardson?
In any foreign policy decision, I would use diplomacy first in response to your question. And that basically means that the last thing we need in the Muslim world is another action like Iraq, which is going to inflame the Muslim world in a horrendous way. Now, here's what I would do. First, with Pakistan, here's an example of a country, a potentially failed nation state with nuclear weapons. What a president must do is have a foreign policy of principles and realism. And the Bush foreign policy with Musharraf, we get the worst of all worlds. We have a situation where he has not gone after Al-Qaeda in his own country, despite the fact that we've given him $11 billion. And he's also severely damaged the Constitution. He's basically said that he is the supreme dictator. So we have the worst of all worlds. What I would specifically do as president is I would ask Musharraf to step aside. There is a provision in the Pakistani Constitution.
Ask him to step aside?
Yes. For a caretaker government, because we have the leverage to do that. We have the leverage to do that, and I would send a high-level envoy to ask him to step aside. There's a provision in the Pakistani Constitution for caretaker government of technocrats. This happened when a previous prime minister died, and I would make it unmistakably clear that he had to have elections. Now, elections are scheduled tentatively for February. A broadly based government, it's what's best for the United States.
I understand your point about diplomacy, but Senator Obama's postulate was, we have actionable intelligence, the Musharraf government won't move. Should we go in to Western Pakistan and essentially try to take him out?
If we have actionable intelligence that is real, and if Musharraf is incapable, which he is, because here's a man who has not stood up for his democracy. He is virtually in a situation where he's losing control. Then you do take that action. However, Charlie, first you use diplomacy, and diplomacy is to try to get what is best for the United States. And that is a democratic Pakistan with free and fair elections and a concerted effort on the part of Musharraf or whoever is in the leadership in Pakistan to go after terrorists and those